What if everything in your life, every choice, every twist of fate was already written in the stars long before you took your first breath? For thousands of years, civilizations across the globe have been haunted by the same tantalizing question. Are we truly the authors of our own destinies, or are we merely actors playing out a story scripted by forces beyond our control? From the towering temples of ancient Babylon to the whispering forests of Norse mythology, humanity's obsession with time and destiny has left behind a trail of breathtaking stories, myths that dance on the razor's edge between chance and fate, between the paths we choose and the ones chosen for us. Today, we're unraveling 25 of these legendary narratives, tales so powerful they've shaped empires, inspired wars, and whispered secrets about the very fabric of existence. Picture this: a Greek oracle breathes prophecies into the smoky air, her words weaving a future no mortal can escape. A Hindu epic unfolds where gods and demons clash over the threads of time itself, each battle rewriting the destiny of the cosmos. And deep in the heart of Mesoamerica, a sacred calendar counts down to a day when the world might end or begin anew. These aren't just stories, they're time capsules of human wonder, fear, and longing, each one a mirror held up to our deepest questions. What does it mean to have free will if the fates have already spun your thread? Can a hero outrun a prophecy, or is defiance itself part of the grand design? But here's what makes these myths unforgettable. They don't just belong to the past, they pulse through our lives even now, hidden in the rituals we follow, the luck we chase, the way we gasp at a shooting star and dare to make a wish. As we journey through these 25 narratives, you'll start to see the echoes how a Babylonian tale of a flooded world resurfaces in countless cultures, or why the image of three women weaving our fates appears from Greece to the Celtic Moors. This isn't just an exploration of ancient lore, it's a key to understanding the stories we still tell ourselves about destiny, time, and the invisible hands that might be guiding us all. So let's step into the labyrinth together. The threads of fate are waiting. Beneath the gnarled roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree that binds the 9 Norse realms together, 3 shadowy figures bend over a shimmering well. Their fingers never still as they weave not fabric but fate itself. These are the Norns, the mysterious weavers of destiny. Urd, whose name means what once was, spins the threads of the past with hands that know every joy and sorrow ever lived. Verdandi, what is becoming, measures the present moment with unblinking eyes, her scissors poised to snip a life's thread without warning. And Skuld, what shall be, clutches the unspun wool of the future, her silence more terrifying than any prophecy. Unlike the gentle fates of Greek myth, who merely observe destiny unfold, the Norns are active architects of reality. Every knot they tie, every frayed strand they mend, alters the course of gods and mortals alike. Even Odin, the All-Father who sacrificed his eye for wisdom, couldn't twist their designs when they decreed his death at Ragnarök. The great god could only prepare for the inevitable. That's the chilling power of the Norns. Their loom doesn't just reflect fate, it creates it. But here's what makes their myth so hauntingly human. The Norns don't just weave for kings and warriors. Viking mothers whispered that these figures visited every newborn, carving runes of destiny into their tiny palms. A farmer's ruined harvest, a ship lost at sea, a love that burns too bright and fast, all these threads pass through the Norns' fingers. And perhaps most fascinating of all, they weren't even born as gods. Ancient sagas hint that the Norns emerged from the primordial mist before Odin's reign began, as if destiny itself predated the deities who thought they ruled it. Listen closely to the Old Norse tales and you'll notice something strange. While other cultures saw fate as a fixed path, the Norns' threads shimmer with possibility. A hero might fray his strand through reckless courage, or a cunning trickster like Loki might tangle entire realms with his schemes. The Norns don't judge, they simply weave the consequences. That's why their myth endures. It captures that breathless moment when we realize our choices matter, but the tapestry they join was begun long before us. Even today, when we say the threads of fate, when we tie a red string for luck or speak of life hanging by a thread, we're echoing voices that first whispered beneath Yggdrasil's roots. High on Mount Olympus, where the air shimmers with divine power, three sisters work silently, ignored by the laughing gods, yet feared more than Zeus himself. Clotho, the spinner, twirls her distaff with newborn souls. Lachesis, the measurer, hums as she unspools each life's length between her fingers. And Atropos, the inevitable, waits with her shears, blades so sharp they can slice through a titan's destiny without a sound. These are the Moirai, the fates who hold Greece's most terrifying truth. Not even the thunderbolt-wielding king of gods can cut a deal when their threads run out. What chills the blood about the Moirai isn't just their power, but their indifference. While Norse Norns adjust their loom to mortal choices, the Greek fates weave with chilling precision. Every frayed end, every knotted tragedy was placed deliberately, like Oedipus, whose parents tried to cheat his prophesied patricide by abandoning him as a baby. Yet every escape only pulled the thread tighter. The shepherd who spared him, the queen who didn't recognize her own son, the crossroads where he slew a stranger who turned out to be his father. The Moirai didn't just foresee his fall. Their threads orchestrated it, proving one brutal lesson in Greek myth: even rebellion against destiny becomes part of the design. But here's where the story twists. The fates weren't always this merciless. Early clay tablets whisper of Moira as a singular force, a gentle goddess of portion, who simply ensured each soul got its fair share of life's blessings and sorrows. Yet as Greece's city-states rose, so did the fates' cruelty, reflecting a culture obsessed with order amidst chaos. Philosophers like Plato argued their threads symbolized natural law, while playwrights like Aeschylus turned them into cosmic jailers. By the time Romans renamed them Parcae, their scissors had become the ultimate symbol of life's fragility. Emperor or slave, all threads snapped the same. Yet for all their dread, the Moirai left one loophole. While they controlled the length of your thread, its color was yours to die. Achilles chose a short life blazing with glory. Odysseus' strand frayed with every reckless choice, yet his cunning kept reweaving it. That's why these myths still haunt us. They're not just about fate's prison, but the freedom we carve within its walls. Even today, when we speak of hanging by a thread or say, it's in the hands of fate, we're reaching back to those three silent weavers and wondering if the scissors are already poised above our own story. The air in Delphi was thick with the scent of bay leaves and burning laurel, a holy haze that clung to the robes of kings and peasants alike as they climbed the sacred slopes, each desperate for just one whispered truth from the lips of the Pythia. Seated on her tripod above a crack in the earth where volcanic fumes curled like ghostly fingers, the Oracle of Delphi didn't merely predict the future, she weaponized ambiguity. Her answers slithered through language like serpents, leaving even the mightiest rulers clutching at riddles that would unravel their lives. Take King Croesus of Lydia, whose golden touch couldn't shield him from the oracle's double-edged prophecy. Before marching to war against Persia, he asked if he should attack. The Pythia's reply, "If you cross the Halys River, a great empire will fall." Blinded by confidence, Croesus assumed victory was guaranteed until his own kingdom crumbled beneath the Persian onslaught. The empire that fell was his. That was the Delphi deception. The gods spoke in truths that cut deeper than lies. But the Pythia's power wasn't just in her words, it was in the silence between them. When Oedipus demanded to know his parentage, she warned him he'd one day kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, he fled Corinth, only to fulfill the prophecy by meeting his real parents on the road to Thebes, strangers whose identities he'd never known. The cruel irony: if the oracle had simply named them, the tragedy might have been avoided. Instead, her half-truths became self-fulfilling spells, proving that in Greek myth, knowledge could be more dangerous than ignorance. Yet Delphi's brilliance lay in its contradictions. The same vapors that inspired the Pythia's trances also seeped into the temple walls, where two phrases carved in stone warned visitors: "Know thyself" and "nothing in excess." It was as if the gods themselves were mocking humanity's hunger for certainty. Even Alexander the Great, who stormed in demanding divine confirmation of his invincibility, left with only a smirk from the Pythia, a silence he took as approval, right up until his fevered death in Babylon at 32. What makes these prophecies timeless isn't their accuracy, but their mirror-like quality. The oracle didn't just foretell events, she exposed the flaws in those who sought her. Croesus' arrogance, Oedipus' recklessness, Alexander's hubris. Each man heard not his fate, but his own heart echoed back in riddles. Today, when we obsess over horoscopes or algorithms predicting our choices, we're still chasing that same Delphic illusion, the hope that knowledge can free us from uncertainty, when so often it's the very thing that ensnares us. In the heart of ancient Rome, where marble gods watched over a world of conquest and chaos, no deity inspired more desperate prayers than Fortuna, the capricious goddess whose spinning wheel could lift a beggar to a throne or hurl an emperor into the dust. Unlike the Greek Moirai with their unbreakable threads, Fortuna ruled the realm of pure chance, her blindfolded eyes proof that luck played no favorites. One moment her golden wheel lifted you toward the heavens, the next its merciless rotation could crush you beneath its weight without warning. This wasn't fate as destiny, but fate as chaos, a reminder that human plans were just leaves tossed in the storm of her whims. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. When the philosopher Boethius sat in a prison cell, awaiting execution under a false treason charge in the 6th century, he didn't curse Fortuna, he unmasked her. In his masterpiece, The Consolation of Philosophy, he reimagined her wheel not as a force of random cruelty, but as a test. True happiness, he argued, couldn't be found in the wheel's fleeting highs or lows, but in the still center where divine reason ruled. Medieval scribes would later illuminate this idea with chilling imagery. Kings clinging to the wheel's ascending side while others tumbled into the abyss below, their crowns shattered. Fortuna's lesson wasn't just about luck, it was about the illusion of control in a world where even empires could rise and fall between sunrise and sunset. What makes Fortuna's myth so enduring is its brutal honesty. Roman generals poured offerings at her temples before battle, knowing victory might hinge less on strategy than on her whims. Emperors like Augustus built lavish shrines to her, desperate to court her favor even as they proclaimed themselves gods. And when the Renaissance revived her image, artists like Botticelli painted her blindfold tighter, her wheel faster, a warning that fortune's gifts were always on loan. Yet perhaps the most haunting echo of Fortuna's wheel spins in our own language. When we call someone fortunate or speak of wheel of fortune, we're invoking that same dizzying ancient terror, the knowledge that no matter how high we climb, the wheel never stops turning. The medieval mind saw this as a call to humility. The modern world often forgets the lesson until the wheel lurches downward. But whether you see Fortuna as a goddess, a metaphor, or a cosmic joke, her message remains. The only true constant is change itself. The drums echoing through Tenochtitlan weren't just music. They were a desperate countdown, each beat measuring the precarious heartbeat of the fifth sun. In the Aztec cosmos, time wasn't a straight road but a grinding wheel, crushing entire ages beneath its weight before birthing new ones drenched in blood and fire. According to their sacred texts, the world had already died 4 times. The first era, the Son of Jaguars, ended when celestial beasts tore humanity apart. The second collapsed in hurricanes, the third in fiery rain, the fourth in floods. Now, under the fifth sun, the age of movement and earthquakes, the Aztecs lived with a harrowing truth. Their world too was borrowed time, sustained only by the god's sacrifice and the spilled blood that repaid the debt. At the great temple, priests lifted still beating hearts toward the sky, not out of cruelty, but cosmic necessity. The sun god Huitzilopochtli needed nourishment to battle the endless night, and every drop of blood was a down payment on survival. Warriors who perished on the sacrificial stone weren't mourned. They were celebrated as honored creditors, their lives exchanged for a few more dawns. Even the ball game, often mistaken for sport, was a sacred reenactment of the god's original sacrifice. The moment Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca tore apart the earth monster Tlalochtecutli to fashion the world from her limbs. Every ritual whispered the same terrible lesson: creation demands destruction. But the Five Suns myth wasn't just about fear, it was a map of resilience. When fire or flood erased an era, the Aztecs believed life didn't vanish, it transformed. The first humans became fish, the second into monkeys, the third into birds. Destruction wasn't an end, but a metamorphosis. That's why their calendar wasn't a linear countdown, but a spiraling codex, where every 52 years, all fires were extinguished until priests lit a new flame in a stricken chest cavity. If the fire caught, the cycle renewed. If it failed, the Tzimime starred demons would descend to devour what remained. What chills modern bones about this cosmology is its brutal clarity. Unlike Western myths promising salvation or progress, the Aztec world, you acknowledged entropy as sacred. Their pyramids weren't just temples but timepieces, their stairs numbered to mirror the 52-year cycle when the universe teetered on rebirth or ruin. Even their poetry throbbed with this tension. Do we truly live on Earth, not forever on Earth, only a little while? Today, as we reckon with climate crises and pandemics, the Fifth Sun's lesson echoes. Civilizations aren't promised gentle ends, but how we meet that twilight, with despair or defiant ritual, might be the only destiny we truly shape. Before clocks divided days into hours or calendars carved history into eras, there was the Dreamtime, a vast, shimmering moment where past, present, and future flowed together like rivers merging into the same sacred waterhole. For Aboriginal Australians, this wasn't just a creation myth. It was the living pulse of existence itself, a realm where ancestral beings like the rainbow serpent or the Mimi spirits didn't merely shape the world once, but continued to sing it into being with every sunrise. Walk through the red dust of the outback with an indigenous elder, and they'll point to a towering rock formation not as a geological accident, but as the frozen body of an ancestral kangaroo who leaped across the landscape in the Dreamtime. A dried riverbed might be the winding trail of the Wanumpi, a water serpent whose movements carved the earth as he passed. Unlike Western myths that relegate creation to a distant past, the Dreamtime is eternally present. A dimension where every cliff, star, and honey ant carries the breath of its creator. This concept shatters linear time's grip. While Greek fate spun finite threads or Norse Norns wove destinies toward Ragnarök's end, Aboriginal cosmology saw time as a spiral. The same forces that shaped the first boomerang still guide its arc today. The ancestral fire that warmed the first people still crackles in campfires now. Rituals like songlines, melodic maps of the land passed through generations, aren't commemorations of the past but active collaborations with it. Sing the right sequence of notes at Uluru, and you don't just recall the ancestral lizard's journey, you walk beside him. What makes the Dreamtime uniquely powerful is its inseparability from place. In Greek or Aztec myths, destiny was tied to individuals' Oedipus curse, a warrior's chosen sacrifice. But for Aboriginal Australians, destiny was woven into the land itself. A child born near the Billabong where the rainbow serpent rested didn't just inherit stories, they inherited responsibility for that waterhole's survival. Colonizers misunderstood this as mere folklore, failing to see the sophisticated ecological wisdom in believing a drought meant the serpent's song had been forgotten or that overhunting disturbed ancestral balance. Modern physics eerily mirrors this timelessness. quantum theory suggests particles exist in superposition until observed, not so different from the Dreamtime's unmanifest potential. And just as Aboriginal elders navigate deserts by reading subtle shifts in the land that white settlers called empty, scientists now recognize how indigenous fire management prevented the very wildfires climate change worsens today. The Dreamtime wasn't escapism, it was a survival manual written in the stars, the sand, and the silence between heartbeats. Perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in what happened when this cosmology clashed with Western clocks. When missionaries imposed Sunday worship on Aboriginal communities, many adapted by calling the Christian God the boss of the Dreamtime, not a replacement, but another layer in the eternal story. Even today, when an elder points to a constellation and says, "That's my great-grandfather," they're not speaking metaphorically. They're asserting a truth linear time can't contain, that every step we take echoes with the footprints of those who walked the land before it was land at all. Beneath the spreading banyan trees where Hindu sages once chanted the Vedas, time doesn't march forward, it spirals through 4 colossal ages, each darker than the last. These are the yugas, the cosmic seasons of existence, where humanity's virtue ebbs like a draining tide. In the beginning, there was Satya Yuga, the age of truth, a golden era where humans lived for 4,000 years, their hearts as pure as mountain springs. There were no lies, no violence, no need for laws because duty flowed as naturally as breath. The very air shimmered with dharma, that sacred balance between right action and cosmic order. Men and gods walked together, sharing wisdom under trees that bore fruit year-round. But perfection is fragile. As the wheel turned, Treta Yuga dawned, the silver age where dharma stood on 3 legs instead of 4. Lifespans shortened, and with them innocence. The first whispers of desire crept in, though honor still held sway. This was the age of Rama, the perfect king who wielded his bow not for conquest but to restore balance. Yet even his righteousness couldn't stop the slow decay. By Devapara Yuga, the Bronze Age, Dharma limped on just 2 legs. Lies multiplied like weeds, seasons grew erratic, and lifespans dwindled to mere centuries. This was Krishna's era, where divine intervention became necessary not to uplift humanity, but to prevent its collapse. The Bhagavad Gita's battlefield sermon wasn't just philosophy. It was a lifeline thrown to souls drowning in moral confusion. And then came Kali Yuga, our age where Dharma hobbles on a single, broken leg. The scriptures describe this era with chilling precision. Lifespans shrink to 100 years if we're lucky. Greed becomes the universal language, and truth hides like a hunted animal. Kings plunder their own people, lovers betray for trifles, and the sacred is traded for shiny trinkets. Even time itself seems to accelerate, its cycles growing erratic as humanity's connection to the cosmos frays. Yet within this darkness lies a paradoxical hope. Kali Yuga is also the age where even the smallest act of devotion, a whispered prayer, a shared meal, carries the weight of ancient rituals. Salvation isn't reserved for saints here. It's scattered like seeds in rotten soil, waiting for anyone willing to bend and pick it up. But the Yugas aren't just a descent into chaos, they're a countdown to renewal. Lurking at the edges of Kali Yuga's misery is Kalki, the final avatar of Vishnu, destined to appear when sin chokes the world like a fever. Scriptures paint him as a figure of terrifying beauty. Astride a white horse with a sword that burns like a comet, he'll cleanse the earth not with gentle wisdom but with purifying fire. The wicked will perish, the righteous will shelter in shadow, and from the ashes Satya Yuga will bloom again. What makes this prophecy so gripping isn't its violence but its inevitability. Hindu cosmology doesn't promise heaven or hell, just endless cycles where even the worst decay contains the seeds of its own redemption. Modern minds might dismiss this as fantasy, yet the Yuga system mirrors our deepest fears. When environmentalists warn of ecosystems collapsing, when politicians exploit division, when technology outpaces wisdom, we're living Kali Yuga's symptoms without the framework to understand them. But here's the twist. The texts say Kalki arrives only when Dharma vanishes completely. So perhaps our collective duty in this age isn't to wait for a savior, but to become the fragments of light that delay his coming. After all, even in Kali Yuga, the Vedas whisper, the door to the divine never fully closes, it just grows harder to find. On a moonlit night in ancient China, an old man sits beneath a gnarled tree, his fingers working something invisible between them, a thread as fine as spider silk glowing faintly red in the dark. This is Yu Zia Lao, the celestial matchmaker, and the cord he ties isn't just any thread. It's an unbreakable tether between two souls destined to find each other, no matter how many lifetimes it takes. The legend of the red string of fate whispers that from the moment we're born, this invisible cord stretches from our pinky finger to another's, sometimes loose, sometimes taut, but never severed. It might tangle or not, stretching across oceans or centuries, but it always leads where it must. Lovers separated by war, the thread bends but holds. Childhood sweethearts torn apart by fate, the string coils patiently until their paths cross again. Even in death, the connection persists, waiting to renew in another life. What makes this myth so haunting isn't just its romance, but its ruthless inevitability. Yu Zia Lao's ledger, said to rest beneath the moon, records every predestined pairing, whether the souls involved want it or not. In one chilling folktale, a man learns his future bride is a 3-year-old girl. Horrified, he sends an assassin to kill her. Years later, he marries a woman with a scar on her brow, the same child surviving the attack. The red thread, it seems, can't be cut by knives, time, or even hatred. Yet the red string isn't just about romantic love. In Japanese variations, it binds friends, rivals, even enemies whose lives are fated to intertwine. Korean legends speak of the invisible thread shortening as destiny draws near, a concept echoed in dramas where characters feel an inexplicable pull toward strangers. This elasticity explains why the myth thrives in modern media, from the literal red strings in your name to the reincarnated lovers of Goblin. Unlike Western soulmate tropes, the red thread acknowledges that destiny isn't always gentle. It might lead to heartbreak, tragedy, or bittersweet reunion after decades apart. Perhaps the most fascinating twist lies in Yu Zia Lao's role. Unlike stern fates or merciless Norns, he's often depicted as a kindly, bumbling figure, ties his shoes together, forgets names, yet never makes a mistake with his threads. His comedy underscores the myth's deepest comfort, that even when life feels chaotic, there's an order to our connections. Today, when couples in Taiwan tie red strings around their wrists or Tokyo's matchmaking shrines sell crimson cords, they're not just chasing romance. They're touching an ancient belief that in a vast, uncertain universe, some bonds are written in something deeper than ink, woven into the very fabric of existence. Buried in the sands of ancient Egypt, coiled inside the very first alchemy texts, lies an image so potent it has slithered through 3,000 years of human thought, the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. More than a symbol, it's a paradox made flesh, a living circle where destruction feeds creation, where endings and beginnings merge into a single, infinite act. The oldest known depiction slinks across the gilded shrines of Tutankhamun's tomb, the serpent's body forming an unbroken loop around the sun god Ra, swallowing darkness to birth dawn anew each morning. But the Ouroboros didn't stay entombed with pharaohs. Gnostic mysteries adopted it as the perfect emblem of their heretical truth. That time was a prison of repeating cycles, and enlightenment meant breaking free. In their secret texts, the serpent became both jailer and key, the cosmic serpent encircling the material world, binding souls to rebirth, yet also the promise that by consuming its own limitations, one could transcend them. A Gnostic hymn whispers, "The tail in the mouth is the lie swallowing itself," suggesting that recognizing the cycle is the first step to shattering it. Alchemists, those obsessive seekers of transformation, saw something even more radical in the Ouroboros. To them, the serpent wasn't just a symbol of eternity, it was an instruction manual. In their cryptic manuscripts, the act of self-devouring mirrored the alchemical process, breaking down matter into prima materia, the primal chaos, to rebuild it into gold. The serpent's venom became the aqua regia, dissolving base metals, its digestive fire the furnace of purification. This wasn't metaphor. They believed the physical act of transmuting lead mirrored the soul's journey toward perfection. The Ouroboros taught that to evolve, you must first consume your own ignorance. Then came Friedrich Nietzsche, who dragged the ancient serpent into modern philosophy with a roar. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his concept of eternal recurrence, the idea that every joy, every agony will repeat infinitely, is the Ouroboros stripped of mysticism and forged into a psychological test. What if some demon told you this life would replay in every detail? He challenges. Would you despair or dance? His answer coils back to the alchemists. Only by embracing the cycle, by willing its endless return, can we transform suffering into meaning. What makes the Ouroboros timeless isn't its symmetry, but its violence. This isn't a gentle circle, it's a creature gnawing its own flesh to survive. Modern physicists echo this in their equations. Black holes swallowing stars to birth new galaxies, quantum fluctuations where particles annihilate and resurrect in the same breath. Even our DNA, that double helix, twists like twin serpents in an eternal dance of replication and decay. The Ouroboros whispers a truth linear time obscures, that every ending is a beginning in disguise, and sometimes to move forward you must first consume your own tale. Somewhere in the howling expanse between the Cape of Good Hope and Antarctica, where storms brew faster than prayers can be spoken, sailors whisper of a sight more terrifying than any rogue wave, a ship with sails the color of dried blood, cutting through the tempest without a ripple in its wake. This is the Flying Dutchman, the most infamous ghost vessel to ever haunt the high seas, cursed to sail the oceans until Judgment Day for a crime that echoes through every version of its legend, defiance in the face of fate itself. The core of the tale remains chillingly consistent across 3 centuries of retellings. In one version, Dutch Captain Hendrik van der Decken, hellbent on rounding the Cape during an 1680 storm, mocks God himself when his crew begs to turn back. Some say he even fires a pistol at the heavens. The sky answers with a thunderous voice, "You shall sail until the end of time." In another telling, the sin is cannibalism during a terrible famine, the crew's hunger damning them to eternal starvation aboard a ship where food turns to ash in their mouths. But the most haunting variants don't specify the transgression at all. It's the mere act of refusing to yield to the natural order that invites the curse, like a maritime Prometheus. What makes the Dutchman resonate beyond a simple ghost story are its eerie parallels to other eternal wanderers. The wandering Jew, condemned to walk the earth until Christ's return for taunting Jesus on the way to crucifixion. The cobbler Cartaphilus from medieval lore, cursed with immortality for striking a saint. Even the figure of Cain, marked to roam forever after Abel's murder. These myths share a bone-deep terror, not of death, but of being denied death's release. The Dutchman's crew can't drown, can't starve, can't even mutiny against their captain. They're prisoners of momentum, forever on the verge of homecoming but never allowed to dock. Witness accounts, real or imagined, add layers to the horror. Sailors in the 19th century swore the Dutchman appeared upside down, a Fata Morgana mirage mocking the laws of physics. Others told of ghostly crewmen trying to send letters ashore, letters that crumbled to dust when opened. Wagner's opera transformed the captain into a man who can only break the curse by finding true love, a twist that underscores the tragedy. Even redemption is a port he'll never reach. The legend bled into maritime superstitions where spotting the Dutchman meant doom, a belief so potent that young Prince George, later King George V, recorded seeing the phantom ship in 1881, followed days later by the death of the sailor who first cried out the sighting. Modern interpretations see the Dutchman as more than just a spooky folktale. Psychologists recognize its echoes in the restless drive of workaholics or soldiers with a 1,000-yard stare, people so consumed by a goal they can't transition to peace. Environmentalists reframe it as a warning. A ship that can never make port, forever polluting the waters with its presence, isn't so different from our plastic-choked oceans. Even space gets its own Dutchman naas, a term for astronauts who drift eternally in the void after untethered from their spacecraft. Yet perhaps the most unsettling truth lies in why this particular ghost ship endures when so many others fade. The Dutchman isn't just about punishment, it's about the moment ambition crosses into hubris, when human determination becomes a cage of its own making. Every time we stubbornly refuse to change course despite the storm warnings, every time we prioritize pride over survival, we risk becoming our own Van der Decken sailing on, long after the voyage has lost all meaning. December 21, 2012, the date that launched 1,000 doomsday survival guides, blockbuster disaster films, and breathless TV specials warning of planetary catastrophe. But here's the twist the Mayan elders saw coming 500 years in advance. Not a single ancient inscription actually predicted the world would end. The truth behind the so-called Mayan prophecy reveals something far more profound and far more human about how modern fear distorts ancient wisdom. At the heart of the frenzy was the Mayan long count calendar, a masterpiece of celestial mathematics that measured time in sprawling cycles called backtons. Each backton spanned nearly 400 years, and the completion of the 13th backton on that winter solstice wasn't an expiration date, it was a reset button. Think of it like the odometer on a car rolling over from 99,999 to 0. The vehicle keeps running, but the counter starts anew. For the Maya, this transition marked the end of one great cycle and the beginning of another, akin to moving from one chapter of a cosmic story to the next. Their carvings at sites like Tortuguero even describe it as a time of celebration when the god Bolon Yokte would descend to renew the world. So how did a calendar notation become synonymous with apocalypse? The blame lies partly with a 19th century mistranslation that confused the Maya's concept of world age with destruction, but mostly with our own cultural anxieties. Just as Cold War fears birthed 1,000 nuclear doomsday scenarios in the 1960s, the early 2000s, with their climate disasters, economic collapses, and Y2K hangover created fertile ground for apocalyptic thinking. Hollywood seized the angle, portraying the Maya as mystical fortune-tellers rather than the meticulous astronomers they were. The irony, while modern doomsayers fixated on a single date, the Maya themselves viewed time as an infinite spiral. Their Dresden Codex contains calculations stretching millions of years into the future, hardly the work of people expecting an imminent finale. The most telling clue lies in what actually happened when the long count rolled over. In the highlands of Guatemala, Maya priests held ceremonies not of panic, but of gratitude, burning offerings of copal resin to honor the new cycle. Contemporary Maya weavers in Chiapas incorporated the date into their textiles as a symbol of continuity, not catastrophe. Even the ancient Popol Vuh, the Maya creation epic, describes previous worlds being remade rather than destroyed, with each iteration refining humanity's place in the cosmos. Perhaps the real lesson of 2012 isn't about ancient prophecies, but about projection. When archaeologists uncovered a 2,000-year-old Mayan tablet warning of wars and environmental collapse in the distant future, headlines screamed, "Maya predicted our crises." Yet the tablet's true message was cyclical. Civilizations rise and fall, but time endures. The Maya didn't vanish because they foresaw doom. They adapted, their descendants still weaving the same calendars into today's world. In the end, the only apocalypse was the one we invented, a mirror held up to our own fears of impermanence in a universe far more patient and far more mysterious than our fleeting anxieties allow. Dawn won't come, not this time. In the frozen silence of Norse legend, there comes a winter without end, Fimbulwinter, where snow drives sideways for 3 years, where brothers turn blades on each other for scraps of food, and the sun and moon vanish as if swallowed whole. This is the prologue to Ragnarök, the doom of the gods, where every death is foretold, every battle already etched into the fabric of fate. Unlike the rapture or revelations in Christian tradition, where the righteous ascend and sinners face judgment, Ragnarök offers no salvation. Only cycles. The scale of this apocalypse chills the blood. The monstrous wolf Fenrir, long bound by trickery, snaps his chains and devours the sun, plunging the world into darkness. The Midgard serpent, coiled beneath the oceans, surges onto land, its venom poisoning sea and sky alike. Loki, the architect of chaos, leads an army of the dead aboard a ship made of fingernails Naglfar, its hull groaning with every soul who ever died with untrimmed nails, a grotesque detail that makes the myth feel viscerally real. Even Odin, the All-Father, can't escape his destiny. He rides to battle knowing the prophecy: Fenrir's jaws will close around him. Thor slays the serpent but drowns in its venom 9 steps later. The gods don't just die, they die exhausted, knowing their fate from the start, yet charging forward anyway. What makes Ragnarök so gripping isn't its violence, but its resignation. The Norse didn't worship gods who promised victory. They revered figures who fought despite certainty of loss. Compare this to Christian eschatology, where the Book of Revelation unfolds as a divine reckoning, a linear march toward Christ's return, the damned cast into hellfire, the saved into eternal glory. Judgment Day is final. Ragnarök, by contrast, is a wheel. After the fires cool and the earth sinks into the sea, a new world rises, lush, green, and teeming with life. 2 human survivors, Lif and Lifthrasir, emerge from the world tree's roots to repopulate the earth. The gods' sons inherit their fathers' names and weapons, suggesting the cycle will repeat, perhaps infinitely. The difference between these apocalypses reveals 2 worldviews. Christianity's linear timeline, creation to judgment, reflects a belief in moral progress and ultimate justice. Norse cosmology, forged in the teeth of blizzards and fjords, assumes destruction and rebirth are as natural as seasons. Even their paradises reflect this. Valhalla's warriors feast not in eternal peace, but to train for a battle they'll lose. There's a grim comfort in this. Ragnarök doesn't ask believers to fear the end, but to meet it with courage, knowing that from the ashes of Asgard, something new will always stir. Modern echoes of Ragnarök are everywhere, from climate change narratives framing Earth's potential collapse and renewal to pop culture's obsession with anti-heroes who fight doomed battles. Marvel's Thor films borrow the imagery but strip away the fatalism, turning prophecy into something heroes can rewrite. Yet the original myth's power lies in its refusal to offer that escape. Ragnarök teaches that some storms can't be weathered, only endured, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is charge forward, knowing the wolf is waiting. Under the gnarled oaks of Arthurian legend, where mist clings to ruined chapels like a shroud, there lies a king who cannot stand. The Fisher King, guardian of the Grail, ruler of a wasteland, sits perpetually wounded in his castle, his injury festering as his kingdom withers in tandem. Crops refuse to grow, rivers run sluggish and thin, and the very air seems heavy with decay, all because a single man cannot heal. This isn't just a story about a cursed ruler. It's a haunting metaphor for how a leader's suffering becomes a land's affliction, how the personal and the political bleed into one another until they're inseparable. The tale twists deeper when Grail seekers like Percival arrive. In some versions, the king's salvation hinges on a single question: whom does the Grail serve? Fail to ask and the wasteland persists. The genius of this myth lies in its layered symbolism. the Fisher King's wound, often in the thigh, a medieval euphemism for impotence, suggests a rupture in lineage, a kingdom's future severed at the root. The Grail, meanwhile, shimmers with contradictions, a Christian relic in later retellings, yet rooted in older Celtic cauldrons of rebirth. It's as if the story itself is a wound, layers of tradition festering together across centuries. Centuries later, T.S. Eliot would resurrect this imagery in The Wasteland, his seminal poem of post-war disillusionment. But Eliot's wasteland isn't a lush Avalon gone sour. It's the hollowed-out streets of London, where clerks copulate joylessly and the Thames runs thick with the detritus of modern life. The Fisher King appears as the drowned Phoenician sailor, the typist who lays out food in tins, even the narrator himself, fractured and waiting for rain that never comes. Eliot's genius was in recognizing that the medieval myth wasn't about a singular cursed king, but about the universal human condition. We're all Fisher Kings now, nursing private wounds while the world crumbles around us, desperate for a question we've forgotten how to ask. Yet the myth offers a sliver of hope the poem withholds. In the Arthurian cycle, the wasteland isn't doomed forever. When the right knight finally speaks the unanswered question, the king heals, rains come, and the land flowers anew. Eliot, writing in the shadow of World War I's trenches, couldn't muster such faith. His poem ends with broken fragments and thunder that promises renewal but delivers only silence. The difference between these two wastelands, one cyclical, the other terminal, mirrors our own wavering between belief and despair. Are we in a temporary drought, awaiting the right word to break the spell? Or is the decay irreversible, our grail forever out of reach? Perhaps the answer lies in how we retell the story. In some versions, the Fisher King isn't passive. He fishes daily in a river near his castle, a small but stubborn act of defiance against stagnation. The Grail isn't a trophy to be won, but a responsibility to be recognized. Modern adaptations from fantasy novels to psychological studies reframe the wound as trauma, the wasteland as depression, the Grail as self-awareness. The myth's endurance proves its adaptability. It's a mirror for whatever collapse we fear most, whether it's a leader's failing health, a nation's moral decay, or a planet pushed to its limits. So the next time you hear someone lament that the world is beyond saving, remember the Fisher King's river still flows, however faintly. The Grail remains in its castle, however obscured. And somewhere in the silence between question and answer, between wound and healing, there's a chance, however slim, for the land to green again. In the high Himalayan passes where thin air blurs the line between worlds, Tibetan monks whisper of a journey far stranger than death, the bardo, a limbo between lives where time bends like a river flowing backward. The Bardo Thodol, known to the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, isn't a morbid text but a travel guide for the soul, mapping the hallucinatory landscape where consciousness lingers after the body fails. Imagine waking into a dream where every fear and desire takes physical form, where days stretch into centuries or collapse into seconds, and the only compass is the weight of choices made in a life now past. The Bardo unfolds in 3 acts, each more surreal than the last. First comes the Chikhai Bardo, the moment of death itself, a flash of pure clarity where the mind, untethered from flesh, glimpses ultimate reality like a bolt of lightning illuminating a darkened valley. Tibetan masters describe this as the ground luminosity, a brilliance so overwhelming most souls flee from it, mistaking liberation for annihilation. Those who recognize it dissolve into bliss, others stagger into the second stage, the Choniad Bardo. Here, reality splinters into kaleidoscopic visions, wrathful deities with flaying knives, seductive goddesses offering poisoned nectar, vast deserts where the wind screams forgotten names. These aren't arbitrary horrors but mirrors, reflecting the psyche's unacknowledged shadows. A miser might drown in a river of molten gold. A warrior could be trapped in an endless battle where his victims rise again and again. What makes the Bardo revolutionary is its insistence that time here behaves differently. A single moment of rage might crystallize into what feels like eons of torment, while lifetimes of compassion could bloom into a fleeting but luminous peace. There's no celestial judge tallying sins, only the inexorable law of karma, where every thought and action ripples outward like a stone cast into a pond. Even the terrifying Lord of Death, who holds a mirror showing all one's deeds, isn't a punisher but an illusion conjured by the mind itself. The Bardo's central tenet is this: the afterlife isn't a place you go, but a story you tell yourself. Yet the text offers lifelines. Monks recite it to the dying not as a sermon, but as a series of prompts. Remember, this is illusion. Do not cling to the light or fear the dark. The final stage, the Sidpa Bardo, forces a choice: confront the radiance of truth or grasp at the familiar, even if it means rebirth as a gnat or a god. Here the text's moral urgency peaks. A soul fixated on a lost lover might glimpse them beckoning from a distant hut, only to realize too late it's the womb of their next life. The cruelty of the cycle lies in its generosity. We always get what we crave, never what we need. Modern neuroscience eerily echoes these visions. Near-death experiences often report time dilation and life reviews. Psychedelic studies describe similar ego dissolution and entity encounters. Even the Bardo's insistence that consciousness creates its own reality parallels quantum theories where observation shapes outcome. But the Bardo Thodol goes further. It's a radical assertion of accountability, not a judgment in the Western sense, but the unbearable weight of realizing we authored our own suffering. When the text warns that the mind is the painter of all experience, it's not describing hell, it's offering the brush. Perhaps that's why this 8th century manuscript feels startlingly modern. In an age obsessed with escapism, the Bardo offers no savior but awareness. Its maps of the afterlife aren't meant to terrify but to awaken, to remind us that the intermediate states aren't just post-mortem phenomena, but every breath between birth and death where we choose, again and again, what world we inhabit. The next time you rage at traffic or ache for a vanished touch, listen closely. That whisper beneath the noise might just be a monk on a windswept peak murmuring. Recognize this too as Bardo. The winds howling across Egypt's western desert carry whispers of a sanctuary so powerful, even Alexander the Great knelt before its secrets. The oracle of Ammon at sea were oases. Unlike Delphi's riddles or the Norns' unyielding threads, this oracle spoke with the voice of a god who straddled two worlds. Ammon, the Egyptian king of deities, fused with Zeus by Greek conquerors desperate to claim his favor. Imagine a shrine hidden beyond 500 kilometers of dunes, where palm-fringed springs bubble beside a temple of crumbling stone. Here, priests interpreted the god's will through the rustle of sacred leaves, the flight of birds, or perhaps, as some accounts hint, a statue that moved as if alive. But what truly chills the spine isn't the oracle's methods. It's the eerie precision of its political prophecies and the unsettling fact that nearly all its records have vanished. When Alexander arrived in 321 BC after a near-fatal trek across the desert, he didn't come as a supplicant but as a strategist. Earlier pharaohs like Ramses II had sought Ammon's blessing to legitimize their rule. Yet Alexander demanded something more audacious, confirmation that he wasn't just a mortal king, but the god's own son. The oracle's reply, as historians like Plutarch recorded, was a masterstroke of ambiguity, addressing him as "my son," a phrase that could mean divine lineage or mere paternal affection. That ambiguity fueled Alexander's conquests, his troops now believing they marched under a heaven-chosen leader. But here's the twist: no first-hand account of the exchange survives. The temple's archives, described as vast by ancient travelers, were likely destroyed not by time, but by rulers who understood the danger of leaving prophecies lying around. The real mystery lies in the gaps. Why did Roman emperors like Augustus later send envoys to Siwa, only to return with frustratingly vague pronouncements? Why do later Coptic Christian texts describe the oracle's final days in the 4th century CE, when priests allegedly sealed its chambers rather than let Roman authorities desecrate them? Some scholars speculate the temple's lost scrolls contained not just divine whims, but carefully curated predictions designed to shape empires. Imagine a priesthood tracking geopolitical shifts, Persia's weakening grip, Rome's rising hunger, and crafting prophecies to align with the winning side. The oracle's genius may have been in its delivery. Ammon's words weren't carved in stone like Babylonian omens, but spoken, mutable, deniable. A whispered suggestion to one general could spark a rebellion, a nod to another might secure a dynasty. Modern excavations at Siwa reveal tantalizing clues. In 2019, archaeologists uncovered a sandstone slab mentioning a House of the Life books, likely the temple's records vault. Nearby, a network of tunnels suggests hidden chambers still waiting to be found. But perhaps the most haunting relic is the so-called Wall of Prophecies, where pilgrims once scratched questions into the plaster, hoping for divine answers. Today, those scratches are illegible, worn smooth by centuries of desperate fingers. It's a fitting metaphor for the oracle's legacy, just enough evidence to prove its power, but not enough to reveal whether it channeled gods or merely the ambitions of men. What makes Siwa's lost prophecies so compelling isn't their supernatural allure, but their timeless lesson about the intersection of faith and power. In an age where algorithms predict our desires and misinformation shapes elections, the oracle's ghost lingers. The real magic wasn't in foreseeing the future, but in convincing the world you could, and that silence, when wielded right, echoes louder than any truth. The waves lapping at Yorishima Taro's small wooden boat were so gentle that day, they seemed to hush the very gulls circling overhead. A humble fisherman with calloused hands and a kindness that ran deeper than the sea he worked, Taro had no way of knowing his life was about to fracture across centuries. When he freed a tortoise from teasing village boys, he unwittingly stepped into one of Japan's most haunting tales of time's cruel sleight of hand. The grateful tortoise, in truth a transformed princess, led him to the undersea palace of Yugu-jo, a realm where jellyfish danced like floating lanterns and seasons passed in the span of a whispered conversation. For 3 days, Taro wandered halls of pearl and coral, entertained by the Dragon King's daughter with feasts and stories that made his heart swell. But when homesickness prickled at him, the princess pressed into his hands an intricately carved tamebako, a lacquered box tied shut with crimson silk. "Do not open this," she warned, her voice as solemn as tied against rock. Yet as his boat broke the ocean's surface, Taro found his village unrecognizable. The thatched roofs he knew had crumbled to dust, the laughing children were strangers speaking a changed tongue, and the cherry tree he'd climbed as a boy now stood gnarled and hollow with age. 3 days beneath the waves had been 300 years on land. The tragedy, of course, wasn't the time lost, it was the box. Trembling with despair, Taro untied the silk. A curl of mist escaped, wrapping around his limbs like a shroud. His back bent, his hair bleached white, his skin withered to parchment in seconds. The tamebako hadn't contained treasure, but the years he'd avoided in Yugu-jo now crashing upon him all at once. This twist reveals the story's brutal wisdom. Time borrowed must always be repaid, often with interest. Unlike Western tales where immortality is a curse, Yorishima's sin was refusing to accept the natural flow of existence. The sea had gifted him a glimpse of eternity, but by clinging to the past, he shattered the illusion like a dropped vase. Modern interpretations ripple with new meanings. Psychologists see Taro as a metaphor for trauma survivors frozen in the moment before loss, unable to reconcile memory with present reality. Sci-fi enthusiasts reframe it as a prototype for time dilation. Einstein's theory that gravity bends time made myth centuries before relativity. Even environmentalists trace echoes in the story. The ocean, both giver and taker, reflects humanity's fraught relationship with nature's rhythms. Yet the most poignant lesson lingers in the princess's warning, unheeded not from malice but human frailty. We all carry our own tamed bako, promises we swore to keep, truths we're afraid to unpack, futures we try to outrun. The tale whispers that time isn't a river to be dammed but a tide. Resist it and it will drag you under, surrender, and it may yet carry you to shores unseen. The river Boyne glistened under the Irish sun, its current swirling around a single extraordinary fish, the salmon of knowledge, its scales flecked with all the wisdom of the world. According to the ancient Celts, this creature had eaten 9 hazelnuts that fell from the sacred tree of wisdom, absorbing their power into its flesh. For years, the poet Finnegas had stalked its waters, knowing that whoever tasted the salmon would gain infinite knowledge, but only if the fish was cooked by pure hands, untouched by greed. Enter young Fionn mac Cumhale, sent to study under the aging sage, unaware that destiny had set a trap for them both. When Finnegas finally caught the legendary salmon, he handed it to Fionn to roast, warning him not to eat a single morsel. But as the fish sizzled, a blister swelled on its skin. Without thinking, Fionn pressed his thumb to the spot, then instinctively sucked the burning juice from his finger. In that heartbeat, the boy absorbed all the salmon's wisdom, leaving Finnegas with nothing but the empty husk of his lifelong pursuit. The irony here cuts deep. The poet's greed for enlightenment disqualified him from receiving it, while Fionn's innocent reflex, a child's absent-minded gesture, unlocked the very power his mentor coveted. This myth isn't just about accidental wisdom. It's a reflection of the Celts' profound connection to nature's hidden curricula. Unlike Greek oracles who spoke through human vessels, Celtic knowledge often revealed itself through animals: salmon leaping upstream, stags with antlers like branching sagas, crows whispering secrets on battlefields. The salmon's journey itself was sacred, swimming against the current to return to its birthplace, mirroring the Druidic belief that true understanding requires navigating life's flow backward, tracing wisdom to its source. Even the hazelnuts it consumed grew near the well of Segais, a fount of inspiration where 9 purple hazels dropped their nuts into the water, staining the currents with poetic insight. But enlightenment always demands a toll. Fionn's newfound gift became both weapon and burden. He could foresee enemy strategies in battle by chewing his thumb, a grotesque parody of his initial taste, yet the same knowledge forced him to navigate tragedies before they unfolded. Some versions say Finnegas, realizing his pupil had stolen his destiny, died of grief on the spot. Others suggest he continued teaching, knowing the salmon had chosen rightly. This ambiguity underscores the tale's moral. Wisdom isn't a prize to be hunted, but a current to be surrendered to. Modern parallels abound. Think of the scientist who stumbles upon a breakthrough while searching for something else, or the artist whose best work flows only when they stop straining for perfection. The salmon's lesson endures in our own hunger for shortcuts to expertise, the online courses promising mastery in 30 days, the viral headlines touting life-changing secrets. Yet true understanding, like Fionn's, often comes when we least expect it, in moments of unguarded instinct rather than calculated pursuit. The next time you find yourself chasing wisdom, remember the boy by the fire. Sometimes the universe feeds its answers not to those who grasp, but to those who simply burn their thumbs on the blister of experience. The forests of the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, once ran red with the blood of 5 nations locked in endless cycles of revenge. The Mohawk and Seneca, Onondaga and Oneida, Cayuga and more, their war trails crisscrossing the land like scars until a stranger emerged from the mist. Some say Daganowida, the peacemaker, was born of a virgin mother who dreamed his coming. Others claim he crossed Lake Ontario in a stone canoe that defied nature. But his message rang clear as a struck bell. No people can thrive when half their sons lie buried, and no future can bloom from poisoned roots. The great law of peace he brought wasn't just a treaty, it was a radical reimagining of human governance, woven from visions and practical wisdom. Picture a towering white pine, its roots stretching to the 5 warring nations, its branches sheltering them all. Beneath it, leaders would bury their weapons, not just of war but of thought, contempt, arrogance, the hunger to dominate. The peacemaker's constitution divided power between clans and tribes, with checks and balances that would inspire Benjamin Franklin centuries later. Women, as clan mothers, held authority to appoint and remove leaders. Decisions required near-unanimous consent, forcing deliberation until every voice was heard. War could only be declared if all nations agreed, a safeguard against impulsive violence. But the most revolutionary idea lay in its 7th-generation principle. Every law, every decision had to consider its impact 7 generations ahead. Imagine standing at a council fire, weighing whether to clear a forest or divert a river, not by how it serves you now, but by how it might nourish or starve descendants you'll never meet. This wasn't vague idealism, it was survival mathematics. The Haudenosaunee understood what modern ecology confirms. Systems collapse when short-term gain overrides long-term balance. The great law's echoes ripple far beyond the Longhouse. When the U.S. founding fathers studied native governments, they found in the Iroquois Confederacy a blueprint for federalism. The symbolism of a bundled arrow unbreakable together, fragile alone, appeared in Franklin's political cartoons. Even the concept of impeachment may trace back to the clan mother's power to depose corrupt leaders. Yet the prophecy Daganoweda left is more haunting than any political legacy. He warned that when the white pine's roots were unearthed, when the land sickened from greed, a final war would come. But if the great law's principles were replanted, peace could take root again. Today, as climate crises and political fractures dominate headlines, the peacemaker's vision feels less like history and more like a compass. The great law wasn't about utopia. It acknowledged human flaws but refused to let them dictate the future. Its genius was in binding destiny to collective responsibility, not through force, but through the patient weaving of a story so compelling that to break it would unravel the weaver. The next time you see a white pine stretching skyward, listen closely. The wind through its needles might just be the peacemaker's whisper that the longest war isn't between nations, but between our present selves and the ancestors we've yet to become. The cracked clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia bear a story that still echoes today, the tale of Gilgamesh, the king who dared to wrestle eternity itself. 2/3 god and 1/3 mortal, he built walls that scraped the sky, defeated monsters with his bare hands, yet found himself powerless before one enemy, the inevitability of death. When his wild-hearted friend Enkidu perishes, Gilgamesh does what no ruler before him had done. He strips off his royal robes, smears his body with ashes, and walks to the edge of the known world, determined to conquer mortality or die trying. His quest leads him to Utnapishtim, the only mortal granted immortality by the gods. But here's the cruel twist: Utnapishtim didn't earn eternal life through strength or cunning. He survived the Great Flood by building an ark at the gods' whispered warning, a secret mercy extended because he alone among men had pleased them. When the waters receded, the deities granted him immortality not as a reward but almost as an afterthought, a cosmic shrug. This revelation shatters Gilgamesh. The one man who cheated death did so through no grand effort but sheer arbitrary luck. The trial Utnapishtim sets for Gilgamesh cuts deeper. Stay awake for 7 days, he challenges, proving his body can resist even the smallest cousin of death's sleep. Gilgamesh, who once battled lions barehanded, fails instantly, succumbing to exhaustion. The irony is exquisite. The hero who crossed demon-infested mountains can't conquer a single week of wakefulness. When Utnapishtim's wife bakes loaves of bread during Gilgamesh's slumber, each moldering crust becomes a ticking clock, marking the days he couldn't outlast. As a final cruel mercy, Utnapishtim reveals a plant growing at the bottom of the sea, thorny and bitter, but capable of restoring youth. Gilgamesh dives into the abyss, retrieves it. only for a serpent to steal it while he bathes. The creature sheds its skin, a mocking pantomime of renewal, leaving the king empty-handed. What stings isn't just the loss, but the realization the gods designed mortality as a circle. Serpents rejuvenate, floods recede. Even Utnapishtim's immortality feels less like triumph and more like being trapped in an endless hallway. Modern readers often miss the brilliance of this ending. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk. His quest for eternal life failed, yet he passes through the city gates with something subtler wisdom carved from despair. The walls he once built to defy time become his true legacy, not because they'll last forever, but because they'll shelter generations. The epic's closing lines don't lament mortality, they etch its necessity into clay. Life which you look for, you will never find. For when the gods created man, they let death be his share. In a world where we still chase Silicon Valley immortality and cryogenics, Gilgamesh's lesson lingers. The gift isn't in cheating death, but in making your mark before the river sweeps you away. Before the first rooster crows in a Slavic village, when the world hangs between darkness and dawn, 3 cloaked figures creep into the birthing chamber. These are the Rojanici goddesses, so ancient their names were whispered rather than spoken, their origins lost in the swirling mists of pre-Christian Europe. Where the Norse Norns weave fate beneath a tree and the Greek Moirai measure thread on a spindle, the Rojanici carve destiny with something far more intimate, the tip of a fingernail tracing invisible sigils on a newborn's forehead as it takes its first breath. Unlike their more famous counterparts, the Rojanici rarely appear in grand sagas or temple carvings. They're hearth deities, their power pulsing in the straw-strewn corners of peasant homes and the steam of ritual porridge left steaming at crossroads. Historical records are scarce, deliberately so, as Christian scribes erased many traces of their worship, but folklorists have pieced together fragments from lullabies, midwife traditions, and the embroidered motifs on ritual towels. What emerges is a triad of destiny spinners as nurturing as they are terrifying. The first sister, Zoria Utruniaea, opens the gates of dawn, her touch heralding new beginnings. Zoria Vechaniaea closes them at dusk, her nails etching the final marks of a life's path. Between them moves the elusive third, often called Esricha or Nesrecha, luck or unluck, who adds the unpredictable kinks and turns that make each fate unique. A striking difference lies in their relationship to mortals. While the Norns weave from afar and the Moirai coldly snip threads, the Rojanici are deeply entangled with human rituals. Slavic mothers would leave offerings of honey and wool on windowsills to lure them close, while midwives performed elaborate pantomimes tying and untying knots, spinning yarn without touching it, to mimic and perhaps influence the goddess's work. Even the act of writing fate wasn't set in stone. Some legends suggest the marks could be altered during pivotal moments, like marriage or battle, if the proper charms were spoken. This fluidity reflects a worldview where destiny wasn't a prison sentence, but a river with forked currents. Yet their power had chilling edges. Belarusian folk tales warn of the Rojanici appearing as crones to those about to die, combing their hair with bone combs to loosen the soul. Ukrainian spring rites included effigies called marinas, figures woven from straw and thrown into rivers to symbolize the death of winter, that may have originally represented these fate weavers. Most hauntingly, the forehead inscriptions weren't always benevolent. A child marked with twisting lines might be cursed to wander. A deep vertical stroke could foretell a violent end. Unlike the Greek fates who worked under Zeus's distant gaze, the Rojanici answered to no higher authority. Their judgments were as inscrutable as the wind rustling through rye fields. What makes these goddesses resonate today is their embodiment of life's fragile thresholds. The Slavic world had no Delphi or Valhalla where fate was decreed by distant powers. Destiny was written in sweat and birth blood, in the liminal spaces between animal and human, earth and spirit. Modern reconstructions of their rituals in Eastern Europe aren't just historical curiosity. They're a reclaiming of the idea that our paths aren't solely dictated by grand cosmic forces, but also by the quiet, stubborn magic of everyday survival. The boiled grain left for spirits, the whispered prayer over a cradle, the unbreakable thread between mother and child that even gods hesitate to sever. Deep in the vaults of Ethiopian monasteries, guarded by monks who trace their spiritual lineage back to King Solomon himself, lies a book that claims to rewrite sacred history, the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings. This 14th century epic isn't just scripture, it's a dynastic bombshell asserting that Ethiopia's royal bloodline flows directly from the legendary Queen of Sheba and the wisdom-laden King Solomon. But the text's true power lies in its earth-shaking prophecy. From this union would emerge a line of kings culminating in a Messiah who would rule not just Ethiopia but the entire world. Imagine the scene, the Queen of Sheba maked in Ethiopian tradition journeying from her thriving kingdom in Axum to Jerusalem, drawn by rumors of Solomon's divine wisdom. Their encounter sparks more than intellectual exchange. It births a son named Menelik, who would one day steal the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem according to the Kebra Nagast and establish it in Ethiopia, where some believe it remains hidden to this day. This audacious claim, that Ethiopia, not Israel, became the true guardian of God's covenant, turned the Kebra Nagast into both a coronation manual for emperors and a theological grenade. Fast forward to 1930, when a prince named Tafari Makonnen ascended Ethiopia's throne as Emperor Haile Selassie, claiming direct descent from Solomon and Sheba's union. To the outside world, he was a reformist leader. To Jamaican Rastafarians studying the Kebra Nagast through the lens of Marcus Garvey's earlier prophecies of a black king crowned in Africa, he was the Messiah foretold. Selassie's imperial titles, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, weren't just grandeur, they were lifted verbatim from the Kebra Nagast's descriptions of the prophesied ruler. The irony is staggering. Selassie himself, an Orthodox Christian, never openly embraced the Rastafarian faith that deified him. Yet the Kebra Nagast's vision of a messianic African monarch resonated powerfully with descendants of enslaved people seeking redemption from colonialism's wounds. When Selassie visited Jamaica in 1966, the crowds were so frenzied that journalists reported he discreetly wiped tears seeing the devotion he inspired. The text became the spiritual backbone of reggae's liberation theology. Listen closely to Bob Marley's Iron Lion Zion, and you'll hear the Kebra Nagast's ancient promise of a new Jerusalem rising in Africa. Modern scholars note the text's political genius. By grafting Ethiopia's monarchy onto biblical royalty, it positioned the nation as the spiritual heir to Israel, a move that shielded Africa's oldest independent Christian kingdom from European colonization attempts. Even today, the Kebra Nagast pulses through Ethiopian identity. Its prophecy of a messianic return fuels the Orthodox Church's belief that the Ark still rests in Axum, waiting to herald a new golden age. The next time you hear a Rastafarian speak of Zion, remember, that dream was forged in the ink of a 700-year-old book that dared to rewrite destiny itself. The ice groans underfoot as an Inuit hunter kneels at the edge of a widening seal-breathing hole, his harpoon trembling not from cold, but from the knowledge that beneath these black waters lurks a goddess whose wrath could turn his village to starvation. This is Sedna's domain, a realm of kelp-thick darkness where the most powerful spirit in Inuit cosmology rules with severed hands and a broken heart. Her origin story is no tidy myth but a visceral nightmare, a young woman betrayed by her father, thrown into the freezing sea, her clinging fingers chopped off one by one as she grasps his kayak. Those severed digits transform into seals, walruses, and whales, the very creatures hunters depend on for survival. Here's the brutal equation of Arctic life. Sedna's agony literally becomes sustenance, her pain the price of human survival. What chills more than the violence is the capricious intimacy of her power. When hunters fail to bring home meat, elders whisper that Sedna's tangled hair, matted with the sins of broken taboos, has clogged the ocean's bounty. Only the Angakok shaman can brave the journey to her underwater lair, combing the goddess's hair with bone fingers to soothe her rage. But Sedna isn't some distant Olympian demanding sacrifices. Her moods mirror the land's harsh lessons. Overhunt, she withholds seals, disrespect the kill by letting dogs gnaw bones. The sea ice thickens unnaturally. Even environmental shifts modern scientists attribute to climate change, unpredictable migrations, thinning ice, align eerily with traditional warnings of Sedna's displeasure. The genius of this myth lies in its ecological precision. Unlike gods who punish with floods or fire, Sedna's retribution is starvation delivered through the very creatures she birthed in trauma. There's no appeasing her with gold or grand temples. Compliance requires absolute respect for natural balance. Before modern conservation studies confirmed the fragility of marine ecosystems, Sedna's law enforced sustainable practices, using every part of the animal, hunting only what's needed, observing seasonal bans. A broken taboo isn't just blasphemy, it's literally tangling the food supply in the goddess's hair. Modern Inuit artists and activists have reclaimed Sedna as a symbol of both environmental justice and cultural resilience. Her story resonates in battles against Arctic oil drilling, where severed fingers could represent oil spills choking marine life. Contemporary sculptures depict her not as a monster, but as a sorrowful mother. Her missing hands a reminder that human survival is irrevocably tangled with the suffering we inflict. The next time you hear of melting ice caps or starving polar bears, listen closely. That groaning sound isn't just shifting glaciers, it's Sedna stirring in the depths, her severed fingers writing warnings in currents we're only beginning to understand. The mist still clung to the forests of ancient Britain when a forgotten sword appeared, not in a lake held by a lady's hand, but plunged deep into an anvil atop a stone, its blade gleaming with a promise that would fracture a kingdom's future. Forget the sanitized versions where young Arthur tugs Excalibur free in a moment of childlike wonder. The original Welsh and French texts paint a far more sinister scene, a weapon lodged not by magic but by human hands, its test less about destiny and more about power's oldest game, manufactured legitimacy. Consider the context. Britain bled from Roman withdrawal, its warlords carving fiefdoms from chaos. When mysterious inscriptions appeared on that stone, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of all England," it wasn't divine intervention. It was political theatre crafted by Merlin, the ultimate strategist. The anvil itself is the giveaway. In medieval metallurgy, swords aren't forged in anvils but on them. This wasn't a test of strength but of narrative control. The real miracle wasn't Arthur's pulling the sword, but everyone believing he was the only one who could. Yet here's where the myth twists. Later versions, like Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, added a chilling detail. Countless knights tried and failed to remove the sword before Arthur, their arms trembling with exhaustion. Modern historians see echoes of ancient inauguration rites, like the Irish Lear Fail, a stone that supposedly roared when touched by the true High King. But Arthur's story differs crucially. Where Celtic stones affirmed existing royal bloodlines, Excalibur's test created kingship from nothing. That shift reveals a brutal truth. Legitimacy isn't inherited, it's conjured through stories convincing enough to make swords stick in stones. The sword's dual origin stories deepen the intrigue. In some texts, Arthur breaks his first sword in battle and receives Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake, a separate blade altogether. This suggests early compilers struggled to reconcile two traditions, one where kingship is earned through supernatural trial, another where it's gifted by older, deeper powers of the land. Archaeology adds fuel to the fire. 5th century Britain saw swords ritually bent and thrown into waters, not as offerings but to prevent rivals from wielding them. Excalibur's watery return in Arthur's final moments mirrors this practice, framing the sword as a totem too dangerous to outlive its king. What makes the sword in the stone timeless isn't its magic, but its ambiguity. Divine right or clever fraud, democratic meritocracy or rigged system, even the blade's name whispers this duality. Excalibur likely evolved from the Welsh caladfwlch, meaning hard breach, a weapon that shatters boundaries. But in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia, it's Caliburnus, possibly from the Latin calibs, steel, tying it to Roman metallurgical superiority. Every era rewrote the sword to mirror its anxieties about power. Medieval peasants needed a king chosen by God. Enlightenment thinkers preferred a meritocratic hero, and modern cynics spot the puppet strings behind the prophecy. Next time you see that iconic image, a boy's hand gripping the sword's hilt, look closer. The real power lies not in the blade, but in the stone that held it. Because the test was never about strength, it was about who controls the story and who agrees to believe it. The golden throne of Jamshid didn't just gleam in the Persian sun. It soared above the clouds, carried by a legion of enslaved divs, the demons he'd conquered and chained to his will. For 7 centuries, the great Shah ruled over a paradise on earth, his reign so flawless that no one died, no one grew old, and no one even felt the sting of winter's wind. His cup, the legendary Jam-e-Jam, revealed all the world's secrets to his eyes. His flag bore no emblem, for he believed himself beyond symbols, a king who transcended mortality itself. But in the shadow of such glory lurked a fatal flaw, one that would send his empire crashing to the dust, the moment he forgot the first rule of Zoroastrian wisdom, that no mortal, no matter how glorious, may claim the station of Ahura Mazda, the one uncreated god. What makes Jamshid's fall so gripping isn't the spectacle of his downfall, but the precision of its moral geometry. Zoroastrian cosmology revolves around the eternal struggle between a Shah cosmic order and drudge deception, with every soul, even kings, caught in the balance. When Jamshid ordered his subjects to bow before him as a deity, when he declared his throne equal to the sun, he didn't just offend the divine, he fractured a Shah itself. The response was swift and brutal. The legendary hero Feridun, armed with an ox-headed mace and the blessing of the divine, stormed Jamshid's palace. But here's the twist: the throne didn't topple because of Feridun's strength. It crumbled because the divs, sensing the shift in cosmic order, shook off their chains. Jamshid's power had always been borrowed, his miracles contingent on his humility. The moment he conflated his role as a steward of a Shah with its source, the universe itself unraveled his reign. This myth isn't just a cautionary tale about pride, it's a masterclass in Zoroastrian dualism. Unlike Greek tragedies where fate feels capricious or Abrahamic falls where punishment follows sin, Jamshid's story illustrates a universe governed by mathematical justice. The Avestan texts describe his reign as a literal golden age, seasons in harmony, animals speaking like men, but emphasize that these wonders were reflections of his alignment with a Shah, not his own divinity. His fatal error wasn't just arrogance, but category error, mistaking the mirror for the light. Modern scholars see echoes in Plato's Philosopher Kings or even the Confucian mandate of heaven, but Zoroastrianism's version cuts deeper. The godlike Jamshid wasn't struck down by a jealous god. He simply stepped outside the cosmic framework that made his greatness possible, like a fish declaring itself the ocean. The aftermath of his fall holds a darker lesson still. Legends say Jamshid fled for 100 years, hiding in pieces, a hand here, an eye there, until finally captured and sawn apart by his enemies. This grotesque end mirrors the Zoroastrian reverence for wholeness. To violate a Shah is to invite fragmentation. Even his throne's remnants took on mythic weight. Persian miniatures depict Feridun repurposing its timbers for his own crown, a warning that no dynasty is permanent, only the principles they serve. Today, when Iranians celebrate Nowruz, the spring equinox, they're not just marking a new year. they're ritually reenacting Jamshed's lost golden age while acknowledging its fragility. The holiday's Haft Sin table, adorned with sprouts and mirrors, embodies the same tension prosperity cherished but never claimed as birthright. Perhaps the most haunting resonance lies in how Jamshed's throne prefigures modern hubris. When corporations hoard wealth like his golden cup or politicians conflate power with infallibility, they're replaying his fatal miscalculation. Zoroastrianism's brilliance was in recognizing that cosmic justice isn't vengeful, it's corrective. The throne didn't fall because the gods were angry, it fell because balance demanded it. In an age of climate crises and collapsing empires, Jamshed's story whispers a chilling question. What chains are we relying on that might shake loose when the order we've exploited finally says enough? Deep beneath the red sands of the American Southwest, where the earth cracks open like an ancient mouth, the Hopi people trace their origins not to a garden, but to a series of underworlds, each one a crucible testing humanity's worthiness to ascend. Their emergence myth begins in darkness in the first world called Tukpela, where people lived as thoughtless shadows, their spirits unformed. But when greed and discord poisoned their hearts, the ant people, tiny yet wise beyond measure, led the worthy through a hollow reed into the second world. Here the air was thicker, the challenges sharper. Humans learned to build and plant, yet again fell to quarreling. Spider Grandmother, the cosmic weaver of destiny, spun a new escape route, this time to the third world, a place of towering cities and rivers that ran with abundance. But prosperity proved the cruelest test of all. The Hopi tell of a time when brother turned against brother, when sorcerers twisted sacred knowledge into weapons, when a great flood rose not from divine wrath, but from humanity's failure to live as stewards rather than takers. As waters swallowed the third world, Spider Grandmother sealed the righteous inside hollow reeds once more, singing them into the fourth world, our world, through a portal called the Sipapu, the navel of existence. Emerging onto the arid mesas of what's now Arizona, the survivors carried more than memories, they carried prophecies etched into their very bones. What sets the Hopi narrative apart is its chilling specificity about cycles. Unlike apocalypses that end in final judgment, their tradition speaks of 9 signs foretelling humanity's reckoning in the fourth world, tests mirroring the failures of previous worlds. The first sign, weapons that roar like thunder and rain metal from the sky, gunpowder. The third, a spinning web that encircles the earth, telecommunication wires. The ninth and final warning, a dwelling place in the heavens crashing down upon the wicked, interpreted by some as climate collapse or asteroid impact. Each sign isn't just prediction, it's an invitation to course correct before history repeats. Central to this cosmology is the figure of Masor, the skeletal guardian of the fourth world. Unlike benevolent creator gods, Masor greeted the Hopi with a gourd of ashes and a stark mandate. Live humbly, work the hard earth, and prove you deserve this world. His bony vicence wasn't meant to frighten, but to remind that life springs from death, that abundance grows from restraint. The Hopi's dry farming techniques, coaxing corn from desert soil without irrigation, embody this covenant. Where other cultures sought to conquer nature, the Hopi learned to listen to it, their very survival a dialogue with the land. Modern parallels vibrate with urgency. When Hopi elders met with United Nations officials in 1992, they didn't plead for intervention. They presented ancient stone tablets depicting the 9 signs, warning that industrial civilization was barreling toward the same mistakes that drowned the third world. Climate scientists now confirm what the prophecies hinted: overuse of resources, war over water, the unraveling of ecological balance. Yet the myth's brilliance lies in its loophole, the fifth world. Just as the ant people offered escape to those who heeded warnings, the Hopi believe a remnant will survive to enter a new era, but only if they carry forward the old wisdom. That emergence isn't a one-time event, but a perpetual choice between ascent and oblivion. The next time you see a spider's web glistening with dew at dawn, consider this. Across centuries and cataclysms, a people kept alive the memory of worlds before ours, not as fairy tales but as maps. The Sipapu isn't just a hole in the ground, it's a mirror reflecting back the question every generation must answer. Will we be the architects of our own descent or the seeds of something wiser? From the Norns weaving fate beneath Yggdrasil to the Hopi's spiral ascent through collapsing worlds, these 25 myths share a heartbeat, a primal human tremor before time's unrelenting current and destiny's inscrutable designs. Whether it's Gilgamesh raging against mortality or Sedna's severed fingers becoming the Arctic's bounty, every culture has grappled with the same dizzying questions. Are we passengers or pilots on this journey? Do our choices matter, or are we just playing out scripts written in stars, threads, or sacred calendars? The brilliance lies in how each civilization dressed these fears in stories that could comfort as much as caution, turning cosmic dread into something you could hold, whether it's a Celtic salmon's shimmering scales or the Fisher King's festering wound. What binds these narratives isn't just their shared themes, but their refusal to offer easy answers. The Norse embraced their doom at Ragnarök with ale and battle cries. The Maya watched their calendar reset without panic. The Rojanitsi etched destinies in transient forehead marks, while the Ouroboros devours itself to be reborn. There's a strange solace in their contradictions, proof that humanity has always danced between free will and fate, between the terror of uncertainty and the tyranny of predestination. Even our modern obsessions, algorithmic horoscopes, AI predictions, quantum theories of parallel futures are just new dialects in this ancient conversation. So tell me in the comments which myth coiled around your imagination. Was it the tragic precision of Oedipus's thread, or the red string tugging lovers across lifetimes, the dread of Kali Yuga's decay, or the defiant hope in the fifth world's emergence? This labyrinth of stories is far from exhausted. Beyond these 25 lie countless more, each a key to understanding how we've navigated time's river and destiny's maze. And if you're hungry for more mysteries that blur history and myth, stay tuned. Our next adventure will plunge into real-world enigmas that feel plucked from legend, vanished civilizations, artifacts that defy explanation, and the eerie places where the past refuses to stay buried. Until then, remember, whether you're a thread in the Norns' loom or a hero carving your own path, the story's richness lies in the telling.